The scar on her side wasn't just a mark, it was a map. A jagged latitude of survival etched into flesh, tracing the invisible line between who she'd been and who she'd become. Winter had a way of settling into that ridge of skin, a cold ache that mirrored the quiet fury of the oak tree outside her office window. Its branches, skeletal and unyielding, clawed at the gray skies of a city that never fully warmed. She'd learned to read the seasons in its bark, to measure time in the rustle of leaves that refused to fall. By day, her hands moved with a precision that startled interns, steady, clinical, detached from the tremor that once shook them. Nights were another story. The hospital corridors, hushed and sodium-lit, hummed with memories she'd scalpeled into silence. Patients whispered about her calm, the way she stared down chaos like a surgeon dissecting a tumor. They didn't know calm was just control, polished to a blade's edge. Then came the letter. No return address, no signature, just a name, Jamie, and a plea that tasted like a reckoning. She left it unopened on her desk for 3 days, watching the oak shed its final leaf. When she finally slit the envelope, the words inside didn't surprise her. They never did. Betrayal, after all, had a rhythm, a cadence as familiar as the scar's geography. What lingered wasn't shock, but a cold calculus. How many lives could a broken heart mend before it turned to stone? The answer, she suspected, was written in the snow beginning to fall outside, a fresh, unsullied page, waiting for the weight of footsteps. Chapter 1. The rhythmic beep of the cardiac monitor was a metronome for life, a steady, reassuring pulse beneath the focused silence of the operating theater. My world narrowed to the intricate landscape revealed in the beam of the overhead light, the glistening layers of tissue, the delicate network of vessels, the precise dance required to mend what was broken. My hands, encased in sterile blue, moved with a calm certainty I'd forged in fire. Steady, precise, a tremor here meant death. There was no room for error, no space for anything but the absolute present. The cold air conditioning hummed, a familiar backdrop to the controlled chaos of saving a life. This was my domain now. This was where I belonged. Then, the anesthesiologist adjusted a line near the patient's head. His gloved knuckle brushed the cold metal railing with a faint clink. Clink. The sound wasn't loud, but it detonated silently within my skull. The sterile white tiles of the OR dissolved, replaced instantly by the fractured kaleidoscopic horror of that windshield. Not the clear view through surgical glass, but a spider web of cracks radiating outwards from an impact point, obscuring and distorting the world beyond. The rhythmic beep warped into the high-pitched, endless scream of tearing metal. The cold precision of the OR vanished, replaced by a different cold, the biting, invasive cold of January air rushing in through shattered windows. The clink became the grotesque symphony of the crash, the initial sickening thud of impact, the shriek of tortured steel folding inwards, the terrifying pop of glass surrendering to force, exploding inward like lethal crystalline flowers blooming in slow motion. Pain wasn't a sensation, it was the universe collapsing onto my right side, blinding, cold, an icy fire that seared through muscle and bone, pinning me against the twisted remains of what had been the passenger seat. The world wasn't tilted, it was broken. Gravity ceased to make sense. My head swam, vision blurring at the edges, darkness threatening to swallow the horrifying tableau. Through the jagged hole where the windshield used to be, snow swirled like ash. It dusted the dashboard, my lap, the dark wet stain spreading across the fabric of my coat. My breath came in ragged, shallow gasps, each one a knife twist in my ribs. I tried to move my legs. Nothing, only a terrifying numbness below the waist, punctuated by sharp electric jolts of agony if I shifted even slightly. Panic, cold and thick, began to seep through the shock. I needed help. Where was? My gaze, swimming and unfocused, finally landed on him. David. My husband. He was moving. Outside the car. Relief, desperate and fragile, surged for a millisecond. He was alive. He could get help. He'd get me out. He stumbled away from the driver's side door, which hung open at a grotesque angle. He wasn't looking back, not at the wreckage of our car, not at me. His focus was laser intent on the other vehicle, a smaller sedan crumpled against the concrete barrier 20 feet away, steam hissing from its ruined hood like a dying beast. He scrambled towards it, his movements jerky but determined, ignoring the treacherous ice underfoot. David. My voice was a weak croak, lost in the moaning wind and the hiss of escaping fluids. He didn't turn. He reached the other car, wrenched at the passenger door. It gave with a shriek of metal. He leaned in, and a moment later, he was dragging someone out. Her. Elena. His pale ethereal first love, the ghost who had never truly left our marriage. Her long dark hair fanned out against the dirty snow as he pulled her clear, cradling her head with frantic tenderness. He was shouting her name, his voice raw with fear, a sound that carried clearly through the frozen air, sharp as the glass shards embedded in my arm. Elena. Can you hear me? Stay with me, oh God. Please. He didn't look back, not once, not a glance towards the wreckage where his wife was pinned, bleeding, slowly freezing. His entire being was focused on her, on saving her. The fragile thread of relief snapped. A different kind of cold flooded me, deeper than the January air, colder than the numbness in my legs. It wasn't shock, it was the absolute soul-freezing realization of abandonment, a choice, made in a split second and now etched forever in the frozen tableau before me. He had chosen her life over mine. My right hand, trembling violently, instinctively reached out towards the jagged hole in the window frame, towards the receding figure hunched over Elena in the snow. A plea, a desperate silent cry for the man who had promised to cherish me. My fingers brushed the sharp icy edge of broken glass. The pain registered distantly, a pinprick against the vast howling void opening inside my chest. The effort was too much. My arm fell limp, landing palm up on the snow-dusted metal sill, exposed to the biting wind. The snowflakes landed on my skin, melting instantly against the unnatural heat of shock and betrayal. I watched them vanish, tiny, ephemeral lives extinguished, like trust, like love, like the future I thought we had. Darkness finally claimed the edges of my vision, swallowing the sight of David desperately checking Elena's pulse, his back resolutely turned to the wreckage that held his wife. The cold seeped deeper, past skin and bone, into the very core of me. Winter didn't just exist outside the car, it had taken root within. Consciousness returned not with a bang, but with a suffocating weight of white, sterile white ceiling tiles, white walls, the harsh fluorescent light that seemed to bleach everything of color, and pain. A constant grinding throb radiating from my right side, anchored deep in my pelvis, pulsing up my spine and down my leg. It was a living thing, a malevolent presence sharing the bed with me. I tried to breathe, but it caught on a spike of agony in my ribs. A low moan escaped my lips, sounding alien in the profound silence. A blurry figure materialized beside the bed, a nurse. Her face was kind, professional. "Welcome back," she murmured, her voice soft as down. "You're in the hospital. You've been in surgery. You're safe now." She adjusted the IV line taped to the back of my hand. The cool touch of her fingers was startling against my feverish skin. Safe. The word felt meaningless. Safe from the crash, perhaps. But what about the other wreckage? The internal devastation? My tongue felt thick, clumsy. David. The name scraped raw in my throat. The nurse's expression shifted, a flicker of something unreadable. Pity, discomfort? "He's not here right now," she said carefully, avoiding my eyes as she checked the monitor beeping steadily beside me. "Rest. Try not to move. You have significant injuries." Significant injuries. The understatement echoed in the hollow space where my heart used to be. Not here. Of course not. He was probably still with her, tending to her wounds. The image of his retreating back, etched against the snowy backdrop, flashed behind my eyes. I closed them, but it remained, burned onto the inside of my lids. The silence in the room wasn't just an absence of sound, it was the deafening roar of his absence, a confirmation, a verdict. The days bled into each other, marked only by the changing shifts of nurses, the relentless cycle of pain medication that never quite conquered the ache, and the slow, agonizing dawning of my new reality. A doctor, his face grave, explained the extent of the damage: a shattered pelvis, multiple fractures in my right leg, internal bleeding they'd managed to stop, severe ligament damage in my spine, months of rehabilitation, a future defined by pain and limitation. He spoke of resilience, of modern medicine, of hope. His words sounded distant, tinny, like a radio playing in another room. All I heard was the echo of screeching tires, and David calling Elena's name. Then, they came. My anchor in the suffocating white sea. First, my sister Lena. She burst into the room like a hurricane of warmth and worry, her eyes red raw from crying. She didn't say much at first, just rushed to the bedside, carefully avoiding the tubes and wires, and gathered my good hand in both of hers. Her grip was fierce, grounding. "Oh sweetheart," she whispered, her voice thick. Her tears fell hot onto my knuckles. She rested her forehead against our clasped hands, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Her presence, her palpable fury and grief for me, was a lifeline thrown across the icy void David had left. She didn't ask about him. Her silence on the subject spoke volumes. Later my father arrived, a man of few words, weathered by life like old oak. He stood at the foot of the bed for a long moment, his jaw working, his eyes scanning the machines, the casts, the paleness of my face. He looked older, the lines around his eyes deeper. He finally walked around, pulled up a chair, and sat heavily. He didn't reach for my hand immediately. He just looked at me, his gaze steady, intense. Then, slowly, deliberately, he covered my left hand, the one Lena wasn't holding, with his large calloused one. His grip was firm, warm, radiating a quiet, unshakable strength. He didn't speak, he didn't need to. His rough palm, the familiar scent of engine oil and pipe tobacco that clung faintly to him, the sheer solidity of him beside me, it was a fortress against the desolation. Their silent presence, their shared protective fury simmering just beneath the surface, was the first flicker of warmth I'd felt since the snow fell on my outstretched hand. They became my constants. Lena, talking softly about mundane things, her cat's antics, a new recipe she'd tried, filling the silence with the comforting cadence of normalcy. Dad, reading the newspaper aloud in his gravelly voice, or simply sitting vigil, his presence a bulwark against the encroaching despair. Their love was a tangible thing, a warm blanket tucked around the icy core of betrayal inside me. They spoke little of David, only exchanging tight-lipped glances when his name was unavoidable. Their loyalty was absolute, a fierce, unspoken pact. One night, the pain was particularly vicious, a jagged beast gnawing at my bones. Sleep was impossible. The ward was quiet, only the distant sounds of the hospital at night, a trolley rolling somewhere, a muffled page. My door was slightly ajar. Voices drifted in from the nurses' station down the hall, hushed but carrying in the stillness. Police report finally came through. One nurse murmured, "Awful business." Turns out it wasn't just an accident. My breath hitched. I strained to listen, the pain momentarily forgotten. "Really?" Another voice, younger, replied. "What happened?" "The husband." The first voice lowered further, but I caught every chilling word. Under questioning, he admitted he saw the other car skidding, losing control. He had a split second. He could have braked hard, maybe spun, taken the hit himself, or he could swerve into the barrier, risking his own car, which he did. He chose to hit the barrier head-on to avoid T-boning her car. A sharp intake of breath from the younger nurse. He deliberately crashed, knowing his wife was with him. He said he panicked, said he just reacted to save her. The woman in the other car, his ex apparently, left his own wife pinned in the wreckage. Can you imagine, choosing your ex over your wife, calculating the risk to her? The voice trailed off, thick with disgust. The words landed like physical blows, each one driving the icy truth deeper. He admitted it. He chose. He calculated. Her life over mine, a sacrifice, not an accident, a decision. My life deemed expendable on the altar of his unresolved past. The cold that had taken root inside me crystallized into something hard and sharp. The grinding pain in my body receded, replaced by a glacial clarity. I turned my head slowly, painfully, towards the window. Beyond the reflection of the dimly lit room, night pressed against the glass, and there, silhouetted against the city's distant glow, stood the old oak tree in the hospital courtyard. Its branches were stark black lines against the lighter gray sky, bare and skeletal, clawing upwards. Winter had stripped it raw. It looked dead, broken, but I knew oaks. I'd watched this one from my window for days. I remembered the dense canopy it wore in summer. I saw the deep grooves in its thick trunk. It endures, I thought, the words forming clearly in the silent, icy chamber of my mind. The winter comes. The wind howls. The ice weighs it down, but it doesn't break. It bends, it waits, its roots go deep. My gaze drifted down to my hands, resting limply on the stiff hospital sheets. One hand bore a fading bruise from the IV, the other, my right, felt heavy, alien. I willed the fingers to move, a faint tremor, barely perceptible. Then, slowly, agonizingly, I curled my index finger, just a fraction, a tiny deliberate act of defiance against the numbness, against the betrayal, against the crushing weight of my broken body. He made his choice. The thought wasn't a wail of despair anymore. It was a cold, hard stone dropped into the stillness within me. He chose her. The stone sank, sending ripples of resolve through the icy water. He sacrificed me. The ripples solidified into a foundation. My eyes returned to the oak tree, its bare branches etched against the night, enduring, waiting, deep roots holding fast. I will not be defined by his choice. The thought wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, it was a quiet seed, small and hard, planted deep in the frozen ground of my soul. It didn't promise spring, it didn't promise healing, it only promised endurance. Like the oak, I focused on the tiny movement of my finger, curling, uncurling, a tremor, yes, but my tremor, my movement, the first fragile step on a path I couldn't yet see, lit only by the cold, unwavering light of this newfound desperate resolve. Winter had seeped into my bones, but somewhere, deep beneath the ice, a root stirred. Chapter 2. The sterile whiteness of the hospital room bled into the sterile whiteness of the rehabilitation center. Walls the color of bleached bone, floors polished to a hard, unforgiving sheen, the pervasive scent of antiseptic undercut with the faint metallic tang of effort and despair. My world had shrunk to this, a landscape of parallel bars, rubber mats, and machines that whirred and clanked with impersonal cruelty. Winter hadn't lifted, it had merely relocated indoors, settling into the marrow of my resolve. My first steps weren't steps at all, they were agonizing shuffles, a breathless, humiliating transfer from the wheelchair to the parallel bars. My legs, encased still in supportive braces, felt like leaden logs grafted onto a body that no longer recognized them. The shattered pelvis screamed with every shift of weight, a grinding protest deep in my core. My spine, held together by surgical steel and fragile hope, felt like a column of cracked ice. Sweat beaded instantly on my forehead, cold and clammy, as I clung to the cold metal bars, knuckles white. The physiotherapist, Mark, stood close, his hands hovering near my hips, ready to catch. His encouragement, "Good, weight on the right, just a little more," sounded distant, muffled by the roaring in my ears and the relentless throb of pain. My hands, gripping the bars, trembled violently, not just from the strain, but from a deep-seated humiliating weakness. These hands, once capable of sketching intricate designs, of kneading bread dough with confident rhythm, now couldn't even hold my own body upright without betraying me. I looked down at them. The fading IV bruise was now joined by fresh scrapes from the bars, the skin pale and thin-looking. The tremor was a constant companion, a visible echo of the internal shattering. It mocked the memory of David scrambling away, dragging Elena. He moved, a cold voice whispered inside, "You can't even stand." Later, alone in my sparse room, the view offered a different kind of mirror. Beyond the large window, the hospital courtyard oak tree stood sentinel. Weeks had passed since that night of icy revelation. Spring was tentatively asserting itself. Tiny, defiant buds, a green so pale it was almost silver, had appeared on the stark branches. They looked impossibly fragile against the lingering chill in the air, vulnerable to a late frost or a harsh wind. I traced the angry raised line of the scar on my side through the thin hospital gown. It was still livid, purple and puckered, a brutal map of the betrayal, a physical manifestation of the fracture within. I pressed my trembling fingers against it, hard. The pain flared, sharp and immediate. A border crossing, the thought surfaced, unbidden. Not just skin breached, but a life irrevocably divided. Before the crash, after. The trembling in my hands became a constant gnawing frustration. Occupational therapy involved picking up pegs, stacking cones, manipulating putty, tasks a child could master. My fingers fumbled, clumsy and uncooperative. The peg would slip, clattering to the table. The cone tower would topple. The putty resisted my weak grip. Each failure was a fresh humiliation, a stark reminder of how far I'd fallen. My reflection in the therapy room mirror was a stranger, hollow-eyed, hair lank, shoulders slumped under the weight of the braces, and the invisible burden. The woman David sacrificed looked back, haunted and diminished. The oak buds outside seemed to mock my stasis. One gray afternoon, rain streaking the window, Mark guided me towards the parallel bars again. The usual dread pooled in my stomach. The pain was a constant, but it was the tremor, the weakness, the sheer loss of control that scraped my nerves raw. As I shifted my weight, a wave of dizziness hit me. My knee buckled, not dramatically, but enough. My grip faltered. Mark's hands shot out, catching me before I crumpled. He eased me back into the wheelchair, his face carefully neutral. "Okay, that's enough for today, we'll try again tomorrow." The kindness in his voice, the lack of reproach, was worse than anger. It underscored my helplessness. He wheeled me back to my room in silence. The rain blurred the courtyard into a watercolor wash of gray and brown. The oak tree was a dark smudge, its nascent buds invisible. Back in the room, the silence pressed in, thick and suffocating. The tremor in my hands wouldn't stop. I stared at them, lying useless in my lap. Tears burned, hot and shameful, but I refused to let them fall. Crying felt like surrender to the brokenness, to David's choice defining me. My gaze drifted to the small pile of books Lena had brought, textbooks, thick, dense volumes on anatomy, physiology, biomechanics, medicine, a field I'd once flirted with, then abandoned for design. Lena, sensing the abyss I was teetering over, had said, "Thought you might find these distracting." Distraction, an anchor, a lifeline thrown into the churning sea of pain and self-pity. I reached out, my trembling hand hovering over the top book, Gray's Anatomy. The cover felt cool, substantial. I dragged it onto my lap. It was heavy, awkward to hold with my uncooperative hands. I fumbled it open. The pages crackled, releasing a scent of old paper and ink. My eyes scanned the intricate illustrations, the web of muscles, the branching rivers of veins and arteries, the complex architecture of bones. The Latin name swam before my eyes, os coxae, the hip bone, my shattered hip bone. Instead of revulsion, a strange fascination took hold. Here was the machinery, the intricate, flawed, yet astonishingly resilient machinery that had failed me, been broken. Understanding it felt like regaining a sliver of control. The tremor in my hands seemed to lessen, absorbed by the sheer focus required to decipher the diagrams, to follow the pathways of nerves, the attachments of tendons. This wasn't about me anymore, it was about systems, cause and effect, repair. The grinding pain in my pelvis became a case study, a puzzle to be understood, not just endured. The language of survival, anatomy, physiology, pathology, became my sanctuary. A wall built page by page against the howling memories of screeching tires and David's desperate cries for Elena. Days blurred, mornings were agony, physiotherapy, the parallel bars, the humiliating struggle against my own rebellious body. The oak tree's buds slowly unfurled into tiny perfect leaves, a vibrant hopeful green against the lingering gloom. My progress was glacial, a shuffle became a half-step, the tremor in my hands persisted, but holding a book became easier, the pages turning with less fumbling. Afternoons and evenings belonged to the books. I devoured them. The dense text, the complex diagrams, the precise terminology, they were a balm. They demanded absolute focus, leaving no room for the phantom pain of betrayal. The scar on my side, when I touched it during dressing changes, felt less like a brand, and more like evidence, a site of damage being slowly, incrementally repaired. Lena visited often, her chatter a welcome counterpoint to my silent study. She brought news from the outside world, mundane, comforting. Dad came on Sundays. He'd sit quietly while I read, sometimes dozing in the chair, his presence a solid, unspoken comfort. He'd watch me struggle with my exercises, his face impassive, but his eyes held a fierce, protective pride. He never mentioned David, neither did Lena. He was a ghost exorcised from our shared space, his name a landmine we all carefully avoided. Their loyalty was the bedrock, the fertile ground where my fragile resolve could tentatively take root. Months passed, spring deepened. The oak tree outside my window was now a full canopy of lush green, hiding the scars of winter storms beneath its vibrant foliage. I graduated from the parallel bars to a walker, then finally, to a single cane. The cane was mahogany, polished smooth by Dad's hands. He'd presented it without ceremony. "Thought you might need this less than the other thing," he'd grunted. It felt solid, grounding, an extension of my own tentative strength. The pain was still a companion, a dull ache, rather than a constant scream, manageable with fewer pills. The scar had faded from angry purple to a tight silvery line, less a wound, more a testament, a badge worn under my clothes, but the hands still trembled. It was subtle now, a fine vibration mostly noticeable when I was tired or stressed. When I tried to hold a pen, the line wavered. When I reached for a glass, my grip sometimes faltered. The dream of wielding a scalpel, born in the crucible of pain and fueled by the cold fire of understanding in those textbooks, seemed laughably distant. Precision was a language my nerves refused to speak fluently. Discharge from rehab wasn't freedom, it was merely a change of battlefield. Home was Lena's spare room, adapted with grab bars, and a shower chair. The world outside felt vast, loud, and strangely threatening. Crowds were overwhelming. Sudden noises, a car backfiring, a slamming door, sent jolts of primal fear through me, my hand instinctively flying to my side where the scar lay. Trust felt like walking on broken glass. I avoided eye contact. Relationships, the very idea seemed alien, dangerous territory. Watching couples in the park from a bench, Lena beside me, I felt a detached curiosity, like an anthropologist observing an unfamiliar tribe. Their easy touches, shared laughter, whispered confidences, they belonged to a country I'd been exiled from, a language I'd unlearned. Love felt like a distant treacherous shore I had no desire to approach. My growth, like the oak's hidden strength, was inward, deep, unseen, building reserves, fortifying walls. Medicine became my obsession, my refuge, my proving ground. University libraries replaced rehab centers. The scent of old paper and dust was preferable to antiseptic. Cadaver labs were my new domain. The initial shock of the formaldehyde, the pallor of preserved flesh, faded quickly. Here, the intricate machinery laid bare, no tremor of life to distract, only the pure, complex architecture of the human form. My focus narrowed to the interplay of tissue, the glide of a scalpel through fascia, the delicate dance of suturing. The tremor in my hands was still there, a betraying vibration I fought with sheer will, locking my wrist, focusing my entire being on the minute point of contact between blade and tissue. I practiced endlessly, late nights in empty labs, my only companions, the silent cadavers under harsh lights, suturing pads until my fingers bled, tying knots blindfolded, repeating procedures until muscle memory overrode the neural static. The silvery scar on my side was a constant silent motivator. He broke you, mend yourself, mend others. The precision required was a wall against the past. In the focused beam of the dissection lamp, there was no room for David's face, for the sound of shattering glass, for the cold of the snow on my skin. There was only the task, the intricate, vital task of understanding, of reassembling. Years dissolved in the blur of lectures, labs, clinical rotations, and relentless study. The cane was eventually abandoned, left leaning in a corner of Lena's hallway. My gait was almost normal, only a slight stiffness betraying the past when I was tired. The pain was a distant murmur, easily ignored. The tremor in my hands, it was still there, a ghost in the machine, but mastered, suppressed through iron discipline, and years of relentless conditioning. It surfaced only in moments of extreme fatigue, or unexpected stress, a faint quiver instantly quelled by a conscious locking of joints, a deep, centering breath. My hands, once symbols of helplessness, became instruments of astonishing precision. In the controlled chaos of the ER, during my surgical rotations, they moved with a calm, deliberate authority that earned quiet respect. Steady, sure, cool under pressure, they became my reputation. Steady hands, attendings would murmur, good in a crisis. The scar was just tissue now, a pale silvery line beneath my scrubs, easily forgotten. I rarely touched it. It had served its purpose, a reminder that had faded into insignificance beside the skills forged in its shadow. I was Dr. Evelyn Thorne, trauma surgeon, known for my skill, my unflappable calm, my ability to navigate the edge between life and death, with steady hands, and a colder heart. The past felt like a poorly written novel about someone else. Summer's heat pressed down outside the hospital windows, thick and heavy, mirroring the fierce, focused intensity of my purpose. Saving lives wasn't just a job, it was my language, my penance, my proof. The roots I'd sunk into medicine, into competence, into self-reliance, were deep and strong, hidden beneath the surface, like the oaks, holding fast against any storm. The girl in the wreckage, the trembling woman in rehab, felt like a stranger glimpsed in an old photograph. I had rebuilt, brick by painful brick, and the structure I inhabited now felt solid, unassailable, built on ground I had claimed for myself. The winter within had receded, replaced by the fierce, unwavering light of a hard-won summer. Chapter 3. The controlled chaos of the trauma bay was a familiar symphony. The staccato beep of monitors, the low murmur of nurses, the sharp clatter of instruments on metal trays, the frantic, focused energy thrumming just beneath the surface calm. My hands, gloved in sterile blue, moved with practiced efficiency over the young cyclist's shattered leg, assessing, stabilizing, barking concise orders that were instantly obeyed. Blood slicked the stainless steel, stark against the clinical white. This was my element, the edge of the abyss, where focus was the only bridge across, where my hands, steady and sure, were instruments of defiance against chaos. The cool air conditioning hummed, a constant baseline, pressures dropping. Dr. Thorne, a nurse stated, her voice tight but controlled, get another line in, now, hang on egg, prep for OR3. My voice was calm, the eye of the storm. Inside, the calculation was swift, precise, vascular injury likely, compartment syndrome imminent, action, not emotion. The cyclist's face, pale beneath the oxygen mask, blurred into the countless others. A life to be fought for. This was my language, my redemption. Later in the relative quiet of my office, the adrenaline ebbed, leaving the familiar satisfying fatigue of a battle won. Autumn sunlight, thick and golden, streamed through the large window, painting warm rectangles on the polished wood floor. Outside, the old oak tree in the hospital courtyard stood resplendent. Its leaves had turned, a breathtaking tapestry of fiery orange, deep russet, and stubborn gold. Autumn, a season of letting go. I leaned back in my chair, rolling the tension from my shoulders, watching a single, perfectly formed leaf detach itself, and spiral slowly, gracefully, towards the earth, a quiet ritual of surrender. My sanctuary felt complete, hard-won, impervious. Then I saw it, an envelope, stark white and out of place, lying precisely in the center of my otherwise immaculate desk. It hadn't been there when I'd rushed out to the trauma bay. My name, Dr. Evelyn Thorne, was typed on the front. Formal, correct, but it was the return address that stopped my breath. Not his name, but the street. That street, the one where we'd lived, where the walls had echoed with silences and unspoken ghosts. Long before the crash finished the demolition, a cold finger traced down my spine, colder than the OR's air conditioning. My hand, ungloved now, hovered over the envelope, steady, always steady, but inside, something ancient and icy shifted. I picked it up. The paper felt ordinary, cheap, the weight was negligible, yet it seemed to radiate a chill. I slid it open with a letter opener, the metal cool against my fingertips. A single sheet of paper, folded once. I unfolded it. The handwriting hit me like a physical blow. David's. Not the rushed scrawl of notes left on the fridge, but the controlled, almost elegant script he used for important things. Letters to the bank, notes left for the cleaning lady, apologies crafted with careful words that never quite touched the core of things. The sight of it, the intimate familiarity of those loops and lines, was a violation. It dragged me back through years of carefully constructed distance, landing me hard in the passenger seat, snow swirling through the shattered window, watching his retreating back. Evelyn, I know I have no right to write, no right to ask. I've spent years knowing that, living with the weight of what I did, the choices I made, they were unforgivable. I don't expect forgiveness, I don't deserve it. The words blurred, my knuckles whitened on the edge of the desk. The golden sunlight felt suddenly harsh, exposing. The oak tree's vibrant colors seemed garish against the gray rising within me. But I'm begging you, not for me, never for me. For my son, Jamie. He's dying, Evelyn, a jolt, electric and cold, his son, born of the life he chose after discarding mine, the ultimate product of his betrayal. The irony was a serrated nut, twisting deep. He has a rare congenital heart defect, tetralogy of Fallot, but complicated. Multiple corrective surgeries haven't worked. He's deteriorating. The specialists, they say there's one surgeon with the specific expertise. The success rate, for this kind of complex revision, they say it's you, Dr. Evelyn Thorne. He knew it was me. He'd sought me out, not for absolution, for my hands, the hands forged in the fire of his abandonment, honed to save lives he deemed more valuable than mine. I'm desperate, Evelyn, more desperate than you can imagine. He's just a little boy. Innocent, please, I'm on my knees begging you, look at his file. Talk to his cardiologist. His name is Jamie Sinclair. Please, I'll do anything, pay anything. Just, please consider saving my son. The letter ended with a phone number. No pleading for understanding, no elaborate excuses, just the raw, ugly desperation of a cornered animal, a father facing the loss he'd once inflicted. The silence in my office roared. The golden light felt like a lie. The single oak leaf I'd watched fall earlier lay perfectly still on the courtyard path below, a bright spot against the gray concrete, a life extinguished quietly. I didn't realize I was trembling until I tried to put the letter down, a faint, almost imperceptible tremor, deep in the muscle, the ghost of the wreckage, of rehab, startled awake by this spectral visitation from the past. I pressed my palm flat against the cool wood of the desk, forcing stillness, steady. The next few days were a blur of focused avoidance. I buried myself in work, complex cases, administrative duties, teaching rounds. I avoided my office, lingered in the OR, the ER, anywhere the sterile, present tense urgency could crowd out the echoing plea on that cheap paper. But the letter was a pebble dropped into the still pond of my carefully constructed piece. Ripples spread, unavoidable. He found me. Of course he did. Desperation makes men relentless. It was late afternoon, the autumn light slanting long and low, casting deep shadows in the hospital's main atrium. I was walking briskly towards the physician's lounge, mentally reviewing a post-op patient's chart, the familiar rhythms of the hospital, a comforting cocoon. A figure detached itself from a bench near the potted ferns, a figure diminished, frayed at the edges, yet instantly recognizable. Time had etched lines around his eyes, deeper than they should be, and stripped away the easy confidence that had once been his armor. His hair was graying, carelessly stunned. He wore a rumpled shirt, the collar slightly askew. The David I remembered, polished and charming, was a ghost. This man was haunted. Evelyn. His voice was run, scraped raw by sleeplessness and fear. It stopped me dead. The sound of it, saying my name, was a physical shockwave. Memories detonated. Elena, can you hear me? Stay with me. His voice raw then too, but for her. He stepped closer, his eyes wide, pleading, bloodshot. They flickered over my face, searching for something, mercy, recognition, hatred. They dropped, inevitably, to my hands, resting at my sides, clean, capable, instruments of life and death. His hope, his torment. Please, he whispered, the word ragged. Did you get my letter, about Jamie? I said nothing. My silence was a wall, thick and high. My expression, I hoped, was the cool neutrality I wore like armor in the OR. Inside, the storm raged. The scent of his cologne, faint but familiar, mingled sickeningly with the hospital's antiseptic smell. It triggered a sensory avalanche. Leather seats, the pine air freshener in his car, the coppery tang of blood, the biting cold of snow on my skin. He's just a little boy, Evelyn. He rushed on, his words tumbling over each other. He doesn't know any of it. He's innocent. He loves dinosaurs, builds these incredible Lego spaceships. He's so brave, through all the surgeries, the pain. His voice cracked. He looked down, swallowing hard, a muscle jumping in his jaw. I know what I did. I live with it, every damn day. The choice I made, in that second, it was panic. It was stupid. It was monstrous. He met my eyes again, his own swimming with a desperate sincerity that felt like another violation. I chose wrong, horribly, unforgivably wrong. I sacrificed you, I know that. I threw away everything good, for a ghost. He spat the last word, a flicker of self-loathing twisting his features. But Jamie,
He's real, he's flesh and blood. He's dying, and you're his only chance. He took another step, too close now. I could see the fine tremor in his own hands, the exhaustion etched into every line of his face. Please, I'm begging you, not as the man who hurt you, as a father who can't lose his child. His words washed over me. Please, confessions, justifications, a tangled mess of guilt and paternal terror. The sight of his desperation was a grotesque mirror, held up to my own past helplessness. Pinned in the wreckage, watching him walk away, utterly powerless. Could these hands, these precise instruments, born from the agony he inflicted, save the living consequence of that betrayal? Was refusing strength, or merely vengeance cloaked as self-preservation? Was agreeing weakness, a surrender to the past, or a horrifying perversion of the oath I'd taken? My gaze drifted past him, through the atrium's glass wall. The oak tree stood in the courtyard, ablaze in its autumn glory. A gust of wind stirred its branches, and a shower of leaves detached, fiery orange, deep crimson, burnished gold, swirling and dancing in the slanting light, before drifting towards the earth, letting go. The silent inevitable surrender of the season. The deep grooves in its trunk, the thick, gnarled branches, they spoke of storms weathered, winters endured. Deep roots. I felt the old scar beneath my scrubs and sweater, not pain, but a sudden sharp presence, a tightness, a reminder etched in silver. It hadn't pained me in years, yet now it felt like a cold brand against my skin. His desperation was a key, unlocking a vault I'd sealed shut. The cold metal of the car frame, the shattering glass, cascading like deadly rain, the agonizing grind of bone against bone, the months of learning to walk again. The tremor in my hands, the hollow-eyed stranger in the mirror, the soul-freezing sight of his back, retreating towards Elena, while snow fell on my outstretched, abandoned hand. The images were visceral, overwhelming. A wave of nausea threatened, cold sweat, prickling at my hairline. I closed my eyes for a fraction of a second, locking my knees, forcing air into my lungs. Steady, breathe. The oak tree, deep roots, enduring. When I opened my eyes, he was still there, waiting, hope warring with despair in his ravaged face. He looked so small, broken, not the architect of my destruction, but another wreckage victim, drowning in consequences of his own making. The anger, the white-hot fury I expected to feel, didn't come. Instead, a vast icy stillness settled over the internal storm, a profound detachment. This wasn't about him, it never truly had been, not in rehab, not in medical school, not in the OA. My journey, my rebuilding, my becoming Dr. Thorne, was mine, forged in fire, yes, but claimed by me. My resilience wasn't a weapon to be wielded in cruelty, it was tempered steel, strong enough to bear impossible weight, flexible enough not to shatter. The oath I took, to save lives, to do no harm, wasn't conditional. It wasn't negated by the sins of the father. The child, Jamie Sinclair, was separate, a life hanging in the balance, innocent, like the lives I fought for every day. The decision crystallized within me, not as a grand pronouncement, but as a quiet, absolute settling. A leaf finally releasing. It wasn't forgiveness, it wasn't absolution, it was simply the next step on my path, an affirmation of who I had chosen to become. Despite him, I didn't look at him. My gaze remained fixed on the oak tree, watching another cluster of leaves surrender to the wind. My voice, when it finally came, was low, calm, devoid of inflection. The voice of the surgeon, not the betrayed wife. Have the child's complete medical records sent to my office, at Dr. Thorne. Include all imaging, surgical notes, and the latest cardiology reports. I paused, the silence stretching. I will review them. I didn't wait for his reaction. Didn't acknowledge the choked sob that escaped him, the whispered torrent of "Thank you, oh God, thank you." I turned and walked away, my footsteps echoing softly on the polished floor. The golden autumn light felt different now, not warm, but clarifying, illuminating the path ahead, one I would walk with my own strength, on my own terms. The storm within had passed, leaving behind a landscape scoured clean, quiet, and strangely resolute. The chasm his choice had created remained, vast and unbridgeable, but I no longer stood trembling on its edge. I stood firm on my own ground. The decision was made. The surgery would happen, not for David Sinclair, for Jamie, and ultimately, for Dr. Evelyn Thorne.
Chapter 4. The familiar, pre-dawn hush of the hospital corridor was different today. Thicker. Charged. Not with the usual anticipatory buzz of a challenging surgery, but with the weight of history pressing against the sterile walls. The air tasted metallic, sharp with disinfectant and unspoken tension. My footsteps, measured and deliberate on the linoleum, were the only sound as I approached the scrub room. Outside the tall windows lining the hall, the world was still shrouded in the deep indigo of approaching winter. The city lights distant, cold pinpricks. The old oak tree in the courtyard was a stark silhouette, its branches stripped bare by the season, etched black against the fading night. Winter had returned, but this time, it held no terror, only a profound, still clarity. Inside the scrub room, the ritual began. The harsh fluorescent light gleamed on the stainless steel sinks. The scent of antiseptic soap, sharp and clean, filled my nostrils. I methodically scrubbed, the bristles scraping over skin, under nails, up forearms. Each stroke was deliberate, purifying, not just of germs, but of the clinging psychic residue of the past weeks, the phantom scent of David's desperation, the echo of his voice saying my name. The water ran hot, then cold, shocking the senses into absolute presence. This was my domain, my ritual, my control. I focused on my hands, submerged in the swirling water. They looked capable, steady. The faint tracery of veins beneath the skin, the defined tendons, the short, unadorned nails, instruments honed over a decade of relentless focus. The tremor was absent, quelled by the iron discipline of routine and purpose. I remembered them trembling over parallel bars, fumbling with pegs, weak and betraying. I remembered them reaching, uselessly, through shattered glass into the snow. Now, they were tools of creation, of repair. Mine, gowned, gloved, masked, I entered the OR. The transformation was complete. Dr. Evelyn Thorne, trauma surgeon. The persona was armor, focus, precision. The room was a hive of controlled activity, bathed in the intense, unwavering beam of the overhead lights. The anesthesiologist murmured quietly to his resident. Monitoring screens glowed with vital signs. Nurses moved with efficient grace, laying out instruments with soft, precise clicks. The air hummed with the low thrum of machinery on standby. And there, on the table, lay Jamie Sinclair, small, fragile under the bright lights, prepped and draped, only the delicate area of his chest exposed, a vulnerable canvas awaiting the intricate, brutal art of salvation. Tubes snaked from his mouth, his arms, connecting him to the life-sustaining machines. His face, partially obscured by tape and tubing, held the vulnerable slackness of induced sleep. Just a child, 8 years old, innocent, separate. My gaze swept over him, clinical, assessing. The pre-op scans, the complex anatomy of his damaged heart, flashed in my mind's eye. Tetralogy of Fallout, compounded by failed repairs, scar tissue, precarious shunts, a landscape of fragility, a life balanced on a knife edge. My focus narrowed, telescoping down to the exposed field, to the intricate puzzle before me. David ceased to exist. The wreckage, the snow, the betrayal, all receded into a distant, irrelevant fog. There was only the patient, the physiology, the task. The rhythmic beep of the monitors became my metronome, the focused light my world. Scalpel, the word, spoken into the hushed room, was calm, authoritative. My gloved hand closed around the cool metal handle. The first incision was a clean line, precise, blood welling immediately, dark and vital. The familiar sequence unfolded, retractors holding back skin and muscle, the rhythmic buzz of the cautery sealing small vessels, the glint of bone saw on sternum, the air filled with the unique, coppery scent of open tissue, the ozone tang of cautery. My movements were economical, practiced, devoid of hesitation. Each step was a calculated progression towards the epicenter of the defect, the small, laboring heart, encased in its protective sac. The pericardium was opened, and there it was, Jamie's heart, beating with a frantic, irregular rhythm, visibly enlarged, straining against its flawed architecture. The telltale blue tinge of oxygen-poor blood, mixing where it shouldn't. The evidence of previous surgeries, silvery scar tissue, synthetic patches, was stark under the lights. A complex, damaged terrain. The silence in the OR deepened, thick with concentration. The only sounds were the rhythmic sigh of the ventilator, the steady beep of the monitors, the soft clicks of instruments being passed. Time dissolved. The world contracted to the view through the magnifying loops, to the delicate dance of forceps and suture, repairing the ventricular septal defect, meticulously stitching synthetic material over the hole with sutures finer than hair, widening the narrowed pulmonary valve outlet, millimeter by painstaking millimeter, rerouting blood flow, reconstructing pathways nature had flawed and previous interventions had complicated. My hands moved with a fluid certainty, born of countless hours, countless lives, steady, precise, unwavering. The tremor was a ghost, banished by the absolute demand of the moment. Each suture tied was a tiny victory, each corrected anomaly a step back from the abyss. The cold focus was absolute, a shield against any incursion of the past. This wasn't about David, this was about defying death, about honoring the oath, about the profound silent language spoken between healer and the fragile vessel of life, entrusted to them. Hours bled away, sweat beaded on my forehead beneath the surgical cap, wiped away by a nurse with a gentle touch, muscles burned with sustained concentration. The intricate choreography continued, bypass machine taking over the heart's function, the organ lying still, a vulnerable silent mound, allowing for the most delicate work. The stillness was profound, eerie. Then, the slow, cautious weaning off bypass, the collective breath held as Jamie's own heart stuttered, then found a stronger, more regular rhythm. Pinker blood flowed where blue had mingled. The monitors sang a steadier, more confident song. Bypass off, he's perfusing well. The perfusionist's voice held a note of cautious triumph. A collective, almost imperceptible release of tension rippled through the room. The meticulous closure began, sternum wired, layers of muscle and tissue sutured, skin closed with meticulous care, the final dressing applied. The intense light seemed to soften. Time. My voice sounded hoarse, unused for hours. 7 hours, 22 minutes, the circulating nurse replied. I stepped back from the table, the magnifying loops flipped up. The immediate, all-consuming focus began to ebb, leaving a profound weariness in its wake, but beneath it, a deep, quiet thrum of satisfaction. A battle hard won. The clinical assessment was clear, the repairs looked good, the heart was functioning significantly better, the vital signs stable. Barring complications, Jamie Sinclair would live. As the team began the process of transferring Jamie to the pediatric ICU, I peeled off my gloves and gown, the ritual in reverse. The adrenaline surge faded, replaced by bone-deep fatigue. Walking out of the OR, pushing through the heavy doors, felt like emerging from a pressurized chamber. The corridor outside was cooler, quieter. He was there, of course, leaning against the wall opposite the OR doors, looking like a man who hadn't slept in weeks, his face ashen, eyes wide and bloodshot, fixed on the doors as if they held the universe's secrets. David, the ghost of my past, haunting the sterile present. He straightened as he saw me, pushing off the wall, his whole body radiating a desperate trembling hope. I stopped a few feet away. The corridor felt vast, echoing. The scent of antiseptic was suddenly overwhelming. His eyes searched mine, frantic, pleading for an answer before words could form. Evelyn. Jamie, is he? His voice was a raw scrape. He made it through the surgery, I said. My voice flat, devoid of inflection. The voice of a surgeon delivering a clinical update. The repairs appear successful. He's being transferred to PU. Critical, but stable. The next 48 hours are crucial, but the prognosis is good. I kept it factual, professional, the bare minimum of information required. The relief that washed over his face was instantaneous, profound, almost collapsing him. He sagged against the wall again, a choked sob escaping him, his hands coming up to cover his face for a moment. Tears streamed down his cheeks, unchecked. Oh God, thank you, thank you. The words were muffled, ragged prayers of gratitude. He looked up at me, his eyes swimming with a complex storm, overwhelming relief, crushing guilt, a dawning, impossible hope. Evelyn. There are no words. What you did, for him. He took a step towards me, his hand lifting, tentative, reaching out, as if to grasp my forearm, to convey the inexpressible weight of his gratitude and shame. Instinctively, without conscious thought, I stepped back, a small precise movement, just enough, creating an unmistakable distance.
a boundary as clear and final as the incision line, now healing on his son's chest. My eyes met his, not with anger, not with hatred, not even with pity, but with a vast quiet distance. An ocean of time and choices flowed between us, cold and uncrossable. He saw the surgeon, the woman in scrubs, her mask now dangling around her neck, her hair damp with sweat at the temples. He saw the competence, the calm, the detached authority. He saw the life-saver. He did not see the wife. That woman was gone, buried under years of snow and surgical steel. The chasm his choice had created on that icy road was now a permanent landscape. He could stand on his side, weeping with relief for his son, but he could not bridge it, not with words, not with tears, not with a touch. His hand froze in mid-air, hovering uselessly. The raw gratitude in his eyes flickered, replaced by a dawning comprehension of the unbridgeable gulf. He saw it, the absolute finality in my stillness, in the cool detachment of my gaze. His hand slowly lowered, falling limp at his side. He swallowed hard, the tears still flowing, but now mixed with a different kind of pain. The pain of realizing some debts can never be repaid, some wounds never truly heal, and some choices exile you forever. "Thank you, doctor," he whispered, the title a formal, painful acknowledgement of the distance. "Thank you for saving my son." I gave a single curt nod, the professional courtesy required, nothing more. "The PU team will update you," I said, my voice still neutral. Then I turned, not fleeing, simply moving forward, down the corridor, away from the ghost and his desperate gratitude. The walk towards the staff lounge was long, the corridor stretching ahead under the harsh fluorescent lights. My footsteps echoed softly. The weariness was deep, but beneath it, beneath the fading adrenaline, a profound stillness settled, not emptiness, not numbness, but a quiet, hard-won peace. The storm had passed, the impossible task was done, and I had walked through it, not as a victim, not defined by his betrayal, but as myself, Dr. Evelyn Thorne, defined by my own choices, my own strength, my own oath. Pushing through the doors to the lounge, I bypassed the coffee machine, the murmured conversations of colleagues, just starting their shifts. I went straight to the large window overlooking the courtyard. Dawn was breaking, pale and tentative, washing the sky in streaks of gray and rose. The first flurries of snow had begun to fall, swirling gently, silently, dusting the ground with a thin layer of white. And there stood the oak tree, bare, stark, magnificent in its winter austerity. Its branches, stripped of their autumn finery, reached upwards with a kind of stubborn grace. The deep grooves in its thick trunk were visible now, testaments to seasons weathered, snowflakes caught on the rough bark, melting slowly. It looked unadorned, vulnerable perhaps, but utterly unbroken. Its roots, invisible but undeniable, held fast deep in the frozen earth. It endured. It simply was. I stood at the window, watching the snow fall. The silence within me was complete. The scar on my side was a faint, almost forgotten whisper beneath my scrubs. His pleas were an echo fading down an empty corridor. The cold metal, the shattering glass, the agonizing rehabilitation, the tremor mastered. They were chapters in a book I had closed. The love I had sought, the validation I had craved, hadn't been found in a man's desperate grasp. It was here, in the steady pulse of life I had just fought for, in the deep, unwavering roots of family, Lena's fierce embrace, Dad's silent strength, that had held me when I was broken, and most profoundly, in the quiet, resilient strength I had cultivated season after season within the crucible of my own soul. He had chosen his first love over my life, a choice etched in snow and blood. I had chosen life, not just survival, but a life forged in purpose, in competence, in quiet sovereignty, a life built on ground I had claimed, inch by agonizing inch. The snow fell softly, blanketing the courtyard, transforming it into a landscape of pristine quiet, a benediction, a release. The cold air from the window touched my face. I breathed in deeply. The air was clean, sharp, carrying the faint, clean scent of snow. I breathed out, a long, slow exhalation, watching my breath fog the cold glass for a moment before vanishing. I am the oak. Without conscious thought, I pushed open the door leading to the small, snow-dusted courtyard. The cold air hit me, a shock after the hospital's warmth, but bracing, clean. I walked across the thin layer of fresh snow, my footsteps leaving crisp, solitary prints. I stopped before the great tree. Its presence was immense, solid, radiating a silent, enduring strength. Reaching out, I placed my bare hand, the hand that had trembled, the hand that had clutched life, the hand that had wielded the scalpel, flat against the rough, cold bark of the trunk. The texture was deeply grooved, resilient, unyielding, a silent communion, a recognition. The snowflakes landed on my hair, my shoulders, melting against my skin. Not the invasive, deadly cold of the crash, but a gentle cleansing touch. Winter held no terror, it was simply another season the oak, and I, would endure. I stood there for a long moment, hand on the ancient bark, breathing in the quiet, the stillness, the profound sense of wholeness. Then, slowly, I withdrew my hand. I turned my back on the tree, not in dismissal, but in acknowledgement. My path lay forward. I walked back towards the hospital doors, not looking back. The snow fell softly around me, a silent shroud over the past, a clean canvas for whatever came next. I was whole, I was free. The only sound was the soft crunch of snow under my shoes, and the steady resilient beat of my own heart.